Hello and welcome back to No Book Left Behind. I'm your host Mark, and today it's my mid-month reading roundup for July. So what have I been reading in July? Well, let's start with one of the usual suspects. And this is the 16th volume published in the British Library's Tales of the Weird series. And this is called Into the London Fog, Eerie Tales of the Weird City, and was edited by Elizabeth Durnley. Now, this is, so far at least, a unique volume in the series, because Durnley has a very ambitious approach here. She's trying to present a wide-ranging, all-encompassing picture of the English capital as an off-centre, surreal city on the outskirts of reality itself, but not necessarily a domain of the supernatural. To explain, this is not just a collection of spooky stories, although there are 9 of them here. There are also 5 other pieces, non-fiction, 3 excerpts from semi-autobiographical works, 1 a long descriptive passage written by none other than Virginia Woolf, and the other one an 1884 magazine published article about the activities of the notorious urban legend Spring-Heeled Jack. So Durnley has a very interesting take on her assignment here, and I certainly applaud that. But I'm really here for the weird fiction, and it doesn't help that most of these non-fiction pieces I did not find all that compelling. Turning to the fiction, it's a decent enough selection. We certainly have some of the usual suspects from the Tales of the Weird series here, including E.F. Benson, who seems almost obligatory now. We've got Charlotte Riddell as well, and Edith Nesbit, whose other contributions to the series I've really enjoyed, but this one I found a little disappointing. There are 2 standouts here for me. The first one is the original short story of The Lodger by Marie Belloc Lowndes. And if you're following the channel, you may remember that I reviewed the full novel, which she expanded it into, just a couple of months ago, and I really quite enjoyed it. And this is fundamentally at its core exactly the same story. And in fact, her expansion into novel length merely added a couple of supporting characters and delved a little deeper into the psychology of our main protagonist, Mrs. Bunting. And she's a landlady who, with her husband, is running a very unsuccessful boarding house in London, who have their financial bacon saved by the arrival of a mysterious new lodger. Around the same time, there's a series of brutal murders of young women happening in the area. Now, the story's been filmed several times, most famously by Alfred Hitchcock in 1927, which was his first big hit movie. And I think it really is an excellent example of how you take a short story and expand it into the much longer form. So I really enjoyed seeing the original, the bare bones of where this novel came from. That was a great deal of fun. But even better than that is the contribution by Arthur Machen. Now, this is a story called N, which is just the letter N from the alphabet. I don't know why it's called that, but there's a lot of things about Machen's work that are open to interpretation. This one's about 2 old guys in London who sit around discussing the past and start talking about the environment of the city, and in particular an almost legendary or mythical magical park which seemed to exist somewhere in the North Precincts, most specifically Stoke Newington. And it so happens that one of these men has a book that he's found in a second-hand shop somewhere, which actually gives a kind of account of this particular area and this very strange phenomenon. And so he sets out to try and find this location and see if he can locate this magical park. Now, this is an extraordinarily weird story, and I've read 2 of Machen's tales now, this one and The White People, and I can honestly say that both of them are 2 of the weirdest things that I've ever read. Both of them remain unresolved to some extent when they're over. Both of them involve a story within a story, which has been found within a book. It's hard to describe Machen's work, just to say that it's phenomenally well written, incredibly atmospheric, and extremely strange. And I'm looking forward to delving into a much longer, bigger volume of Macken's work. I have one in my TBR, and I'm going to be looking, I think, to read that next month, because this story really impressed me, incredibly strange though it is. All in all, I thought this was a decent addition to the Tales of the Weird series. I don't think it's one of the better volumes, but I certainly don't think it's one of the weaker ones either. It's worth a read. It gets a quiet recommendation from me, if spooky stories are your kind of thing. You do have to wade through the other non-fiction, though, to get to them. And so some people might find that to be a little less appealing. Next up is a slice of mid-20th century American pulp fiction, and this is Bait by William Vance, which was originally published in 1962 under the name George Cassidy, and has been reprinted here by the wonderful people at Starkhouse Press under their Black Gat imprint. Now this is the story of Melody Frayne. She's a very beautiful young woman who has lived all her life in poverty and has ended up working packing and grading cantaloupes in a factory owned by the rich William Ransom. Fed up to the back teeth with lots of unwelcome male attention, she eventually lashes out at the foreman and is fired, only to find herself mysteriously summoned to Ransom's home, where he offers her a job as a secretary, which she is pleased to accept. However, it turns out the kind of employment he has in mind for her rather involves sleeping with him and any business associates that he is looking to coerce or blackmail. Now this is a fairly unapologetic piece of exploitation. Vance definitely wants to have his cake and eat it here too, because what we have is a protagonist in Melody who is a good girl, has a true love in Pilot Kenny, and is disgusted by the role that Ransom wants her to play. However, she goes along with it for the vast majority of the novel, inventing very weak justifications and excuses for doing so. Now, you could argue that this is about a young woman exploring her burgeoning sexuality, because yes, she does enjoy the sex in some of these sordid encounters. But really, let's face it, it's just an excuse for a lot of smut. Noir elements aren't very strong in this one. There's the intimation of a bit of blackmail, a vague sense of criminal operations being run by Ransom, but we never really get any details. As I say, this is just really all about the sex and very little else. Now, Vance wrote over 40 books, mostly westerns with titles like Death Stalks the Cheyenne Trail and Apache Warcry, but he also wrote some crime novels such as The Flesh Market and Wanton Bride, whose titles probably give you a fairly good idea of what the content is like. And on the evidence of Bait, I don't think I'll be bothering to check any of it out. Time for some non-fiction now. And this is Face It, the 2019 autobiography of Blondie singer Debbie Harry. Now, I found this to be an incredibly enjoyable read and a real page-turner. Now, this book comes to life pretty early, when Harry goes to New York after leaving high school with the vague idea of becoming some kind of artist. But if you know anything about Debbie Harry, you'll know that by the time fame came calling in the mid-70s, she was already a little older than most, being in her early 30s at that point, which means we have a whole decade of her experiences in New York as a young woman, working as a waitress, a bunny girl, doing some admin for the BBC of all things, and getting steeped in the underground culture of the time. And this is all quite fascinating stuff. During this time, she dipped her toe into the world of music, bringing the glamour to hippie collective The Wind in the Willows, who recorded a couple of albums but never really toured. But she found this role as a backing singer to be deeply unsatisfying one, and it inspired her to put herself out front, and hopefully in front of a band. And that's the point when Blondie started to come together, and she's very good indeed at conveying the adrenaline and excitement and exhilaration of these times. She's also very good at putting across the sheer craziness that threatened to engulf her and the band when they finally broke big, because it happened very suddenly, and the pace of recording, touring, doing interviews, marketing, etc., etc., it does seem to be quite overwhelming, and you can understand why someone with a little less life experience than her would have struggled to meet that challenge. To give an example, Harry was living with band member Chris Stein at the time, and while they were on tour, their flat burned up in a fire. This was 1976. And it was 1978 before the couple found another permanent place to live. And the reason for that was they simply didn't have the time to sort it out. Another thing that comes across very strongly is how gloriously unplanned a lot of it was. Harry didn't have a stylist, for example. She had a friend who made clothes and they worked on her looks together. Hard to imagine that a record company wouldn't have any input to that, especially with someone as glamorous as her, but they didn't. In a similar vein, Chris Stein would, when they were in New York, rent a TV studio from public access television and present a chaotic hourly show on a Tuesday night, in which Harry sometimes featured, where they basically it was anything goes. The studio was filled with about 20 or 30 various local freaks and musicians, and no one knew what was going to happen. Can't imagine that a record company would let you do something like that without any control these days. Harry herself comes across as a straight, no-nonsense personality who you might not want to cross, but also as someone who thinks of other people before she thinks of herself. She even includes a final jokey chapter extolling the virtues of the human thumb, simply because she feels that readers might have felt that the whole autobiography was a little on the morose side. I certainly didn't think that at all. I had a lot of fun reading it. It's a fascinating snapshot of a specific time in rock music. It's very engaging, and I would give it a recommendation. No thumbs required. Next up is a book I read digitally on my Kobo, and this is The House by the River by A.P. Herbert, and that originally dates from 1927. This is the story of Stephen Byrne, an acclaimed young poet who has become Britain's finest very quickly indeed, and success has brought him a beautiful house by the River Thames in a close-knit community called The Chase. However, one night when returning a little inebriated from a social gathering, he encounters new maid Emily on the stairs. He jokingly tries to kiss her, but things quickly get out of hand. She struggles, and before he knows it, he has strangled her. As he stands there looking over her body, wondering what the hell to do, there's a knock on the door, and it turns out to be his best friend John Egerton, and he persuades Egerton to help him dispose of the body by dumping it into the river. Of course, there's a fuss when the girl disappears, but it's nothing compared to what happens when her body floats to the surface a little time later. Byrne is deathly afraid of being caught, of course, and when circumstances conspire to point the finger of suspicion at Egerton's way, he's only happy to go along with it. Now, this was a very frustrating read for me because there's some really good stuff in here. It's a compelling situation. Herbert creates such a great sense of location and place that the river almost becomes a character in the story, and Byrne is quite a complex and fascinating leading protagonist. On the one hand, he's painfully narcissistic and selfish, seeing himself almost as the main character in his own story and crafting the circumstances into an epic poem of knighthood and chivalry in which he is most favourably cast. Often he is tortured by what's happened to Egerton and the way he's behaved towards him, but other times he's coldly calculating about how he can throw more suspicion his best friend's way, and he never expresses any regret at all for ending Emily's life. On the one hand, he genuinely loves his wife, but he's not above stealing Egerton's prospective bride for an illicit affair. And it's to Herbert's credit that his character remains a believable one, even though you have all these contrary elements. There's also some very fine passages of writing here, particularly based around the river and the events that happen there. Unfortunately, there are some very significant problems with the novel too, particularly revolving around Egerton's motivations for keeping quiet about what's really happened, particularly when it becomes obvious that Byrne is quite happy to throw him under the bus. The official police investigation also seems very cursory indeed, and no one's really bothered about Emily's death. It's almost as if she's not a character at all, merely a plot device. Worst of all, though, there are a couple of lengthy chapters which do not move the plot forward in any way, and if they were supposed to offer more insight into the characters, well, that really kind of passed me by. One of them is a lengthy commuter rail journey that Egerton takes towards the start of the story. The other, a dance which both attend, where Herbert seems far more interested in describing the new dance moves of the day than dealing with anything to do with the story. These interludes are just puzzling rather than anything else. Similarly, the cast of featured supporting characters never properly integrate into the main story and seem merely to exist as targets, which Herbert can use to poke some satirical fun at respectable society. His main work was as a humorist, so this was likely a hangover from that more regular output. There was a 1950 film adaptation starring Louis Hayward, Lee Bowman and Jane Wyatt, directed by the famous German director Fritz Lang. Now, I have seen that, but it was many, many years ago, and I remember nothing about it other than that I thought it was fine. I would be interested to rewatch it though, to see whether it's based around the Thames in London, because that is such an important element and really gives the flavour to the novel. But it seems unlikely that Hollywood would do that, and it's probably the story's been transplanted to somewhere in America. But I'd be curious to see, and I'd like to give the film another watch anyway. The novel, well, it's almost a dictionary definition of a mixed bag. My final reading experience of the first half of this month was Lou Valentino's The Films of Lana Turner, which was originally published in 1976. The Films of books, if you're not familiar with them, were a wide-ranging series of hardback volumes which came out around this time, each featuring a huge star from the classic Hollywood era. Typically, they would contain a biography of the star, followed by an entry for every single film they ever made, as well as details of their radio and television work. Now, the film entries would include cast and credits, critical reaction of the time of release, some information about the filming, trivia, and lots of photos, including movie stills, candid behind-the-scenes shots, and publicity material. Now, I love these books. I've got probably about a dozen of them, and obviously it does help if you're a particular fan of the star concerned, and I'm glad to say that I certainly fall into that camp with Lana Turner. I think she can lay claim to being the most underrated actor of all the Hollywood stars of that era. She appeared in movies in all sorts of genres, including dramas, comedies, musicals, thrillers, weepies, romance, noirs, even horror, and she was good in everything. Often the best thing in the film concerned. A good example is the 1941 take on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with Spencer Tracy and Ingrid Bergman, and despite that star power, she manages to be quite easily the most memorable thing about the movie, even though she's in the usually completely thankless role of Dr. Jekyll's girlfriend. In the book, Valentino provides that biography, and it is pretty detailed, but only as much as space permits, of course. Although everything does end at the date of the book's publication, which was 1976, and Turner's career wasn't quite over by then. She did do some more films and TV, but to be honest, unless you're really desperate to hear details of her appearance on The Love Boat, you're not really missing too much. Simply put, it's a very comprehensive guide to Turner's career, and being a fan, it's one that I enjoyed very much. So those are the first 5 books I've read in July. Have you read any of them? What did you think of them? Do you have any other suggestions of books you might think I would enjoy? Please put them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you've enjoyed the video and stayed with it right the way through to the end, why not pop me a quick like and think about subscribing? It would be much appreciated. And in the meantime, please don't forget, keep searching out those strange, twisted, narrow side streets of your hometown to find those weird, dusty, forgotten second-hand bookshops. Don't stop visiting those market stalls, charity shops and car boot sales, because there are treasures out there that only you can find. Be seeing you.